Usually when you walk into a store to solve a specific problem, there's a baseline expectation of logic.
Right.
Like, think about a hardware store. You need to hang a heavy picture frame. You buy a sturdy nail. It is perfectly binary.
Yeah.
You need it to hold the frame, or you don't. It's clean, it's visible, and you can categorize exactly what you need in seconds.
It's comforting because the cause and effect are immediately obvious. I mean, we like things to be straightforward like that.
Exactly. But then, imagine you step into the hair care aisle. Suddenly, all of that beautiful logic just vanishes.
Oh, totally.
You are staring at this massive wall of like 1,000 different bottles, and every single one of them is promising absolute miracles.
Yeah, the miracle in a bottle pitch.
Right. Instantly repairs.
Yeah.
Or miracle shine. Or total restoration. And what do? We just end up throwing things into our cart.
Hoping for the best.
Basically. Entirely based on a nice-smelling botanical extract or a pretty label. It is the absolute definition of endless, frustrating trial and error.
It really is a landscape of diagnostic muddy waters. And frankly, very expensive muddy waters for the average consumer.
Which is precisely why today's mission is to completely shortcut that frustration for you. We are moving far away from the folklore, the marketing hype, and that whole miracle claim.
Yes.
Instead, we're using an evidence-based biological framework to figure out how you can tailor a personal routine that actually works on a molecular level.
Which is so needed.
It really is. To do this, we're drawing from an incredibly comprehensive text. We've got excerpts from Care and Hair, The Comprehensive Guide to Modern Hair Care by Lauren Fabian, the founder of Ingredientsage.
And what is genuinely fantastic about this source is its intended audience.
Yeah.
It's actually designed for formulators and cosmetic researchers.
Oh, wow.
Right. That means we are bypassing the glossy marketing spin entirely and getting straight into the actual science of how things work. It combines deep hair and scalp biology with real-world clinical data
To completely rethink how we should be caring for our hair.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to talk about washing or, conditioning or styling, we have to understand what we're actually working with at a microscopic level.
Right, the actual structure.
Because it turns out we can't treat hair as just a single solid thread.
Not at all. If you look at a single strand of hair under a powerful microscope, it looks less like a smooth thread and more like a highly complex structure.
Like a building almost?
Kind of. The two main components we need to care about are the inner core, which is called the cortex, and the outer protective layer called the cuticle.
Okay.
You can picture the cuticle like tiny overlapping shingles on a roof. Those shingles protect the delicate proteins and moisture locked inside the cortex.
And the state of those microscopic shingles determines this incredibly crucial concept called porosity, right?
Yes, exactly.
Reading through this research, I kept trying to visualize how this actually plays out in real life. Is porosity essentially treating your hair like a sponge?
I love that analogy.
So imagine low porosity is like a very tightly packed, dry, dense sponge. You run it under the kitchen faucet, and the water just beads right off the surface.
It takes forever to actually get wet.
Right. But high porosity is like a sponge full of gaping holes.
Yeah.
And it soaks up a massive amount of water instantly, but the second you squeeze it, it dries out completely.
That is a perfect analogy. And if we dive into the mechanisms of why that happens, it highlights exactly why one-size-fits-all advice completely fails.
Because the sponges are so different.
Precisely. With low porosity hair, those cuticle shingles we mentioned are lying completely flat and tightly sealed shut. There is a high surface tension.
Which is why water literally bounces off.
Yes. So if you have that tightly packed sponge and you slather it in a heavy, thick cream designed to plug holes well, those heavy oils have nowhere to enter.
Oh, I see.
They just sit on the surface, weigh the hair down, and turn into a greasy film.
And the opposite is true for high porosity.
Exactly. High porosity means the shingles are lifted, chipped, or, permanently raised, often from chemical treatments or heat damage.
Right.
Water rushes in, but because the roof is damaged, the water immediately evaporates back out into the air.
So it's constantly drying out.
Yes. A lightweight, watery mist isn't going to do anything for that highly porous sponge because there's nothing to seal the moisture inside. This is why Dr. Elena Rossi, a trichology expert, points out that a porosity-aware framework is the only way to reduce trial and error.
Which means you, as the listener, need to assess your own baseline. You can't just guess your porosity based on how your hair feels when it's styled.
No, definitely not.
But how do you actually figure that out without a microscope?
You have to figure out how your specific sponge behaves with water, There are very simple at-home observations.
Like what?
Track your hair's moisture retention after a wash. When you step into the shower, does your hair repel the water for the first few seconds?
Oh, so that points to low porosity.
Right. And when you step out, does it air dry in 20 minutes or does it take 6 hours? Rapid drying points to high porosity because the moisture is escaping through those open shingles.
What about humidity?
Good point. Does it immediately swell up and get frizzy the second you walk outside into humidity? Once you observe these physical reactions, you basically unlock the biological baseline for your entire routine.
Okay, so if the strand of hair itself is essentially a combination of proteins and protective shingles, how do we actually improve its health?
Well, we have to look at the source.
I actually want to push back on something here because it feels like there's a huge gap in how we are taught to approach hair care.
How so?
If my hair is already growing out of my head and the ends are just dead protein, why do we focus all of our attention and our really expensive hydrating serums on coating the dead ends? Doesn't the actual health of the hair start long before it gets to the ends?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is a resounding yes. The strand does not exist in a vacuum. It grows out of a highly active living ecosystem, the scalp. And the scalp is far from just a passive foundation that hair happens to sprout from. We need to think of the scalp as an extension of our facial skin. The main difference is that it's covered in what we call terminal hair follicles.
Let's clarify that real quick.
All right.
What exactly makes a follicle terminal compared to like the rest of the skin on my arm?
Great question. Terminal follicles are simply the deeper, larger follicles designed to grow thick, pigmented hair, as opposed to the fine peach fuzz hair on your body.
Ah, okay.
Because these follicles are so deep and dense, the scalp has a very unique, highly populated microbiome. It is teeming with bacteria and fungi that, when balanced, help defend against irritants and support healthy hair growth.
Wait, if my scalp is already producing all its own natural oils and has this whole bacterial ecosystem going on, why would I put targeted active skincare products on it?
That's a common concern.
Doesn't adding more stuff near the root just cause grease and buildup?
Not if you're using the right chemistry, and this is where the mechanism of pH comes into play.
Okay.
A healthy scalp operates in a slightly acidic environment, usually around a pH of 5.5. This creates what's called the acid mantle.
The acid mantle.
Yeah, it's basically a chemical security system made of sweat and your natural protective oils, which are called lipids.
So the acidity is actively fighting off the bad stuff.
Exactly. Harmful bacteria and the specific fungi that cause dandruff cannot easily multiply in an acidic environment.
Wow.
But when we use aggressive, cheap shampoos that are highly alkaline, meaning a high pH, we literally blow apart that protective acid mantle.
We're basically sabotaging our own security system.
We strip away the protective lipids, the microbiome is disrupted, and it manifests as inflammation, itchiness, and ironically, excessive oil production.
Wait, really? It causes more oil?
Yes, because your scalp is panicking and overproducing sebum to try and fix the barrier.
That makes so much sense. So by trying to scrub our hair squeaky clean, we are actually triggering the exact oiliness we're trying to prevent.
It's a vicious cycle.
Dr. Maya Chin points out in the research that understanding this microbial balance is the secret to tailoring products. You want formulas that protect the keratin in the hair strand while maintaining that strict 4.5 to 5.5 pH range to keep the scalp security system intact.
Precisely. You aren't adding grease, You are maintaining the acidic environment so the follicles can produce a healthy, structurally sound hair strand from day one.
Okay, so knowing all of this, knowing the biology of the cuticle shingles and the living acidic ecosystem of the scalp, how does that translate to the actual physical act of taking a shower?
It changes everything.
Because rethinking the wash and treat ritual based on these mechanisms completely blew my mind.
It is a major paradigm shift. Let's start with the most basic step, cleansing. Cleaning isn't just about removing dirt. It is the chemical process that sets the stage for how moisture and active ingredients will behave afterward.
Right.
The critical strategy here is sequencing.
And sequencing just means being highly intentional about where the shampoo actually goes.
Yeah.
The recommendation is to apply cleanser exclusively to the scalp first, lather it there, and only let it gently rinse down the mid-lengths and ends.
Right, because think about the physical age of your hair. The hair at your roots is brand new.
Okay.
The ends of your hair might be 3, 4, or 5 years old. They are deeply weathered, fragile, and their cuticle shuttles are likely worn down.
They've been through a lot.
Exactly. They do not need the same concentrated, aggressive cleansing power as the scalp, where sebum and dead skin cells actively accumulate. Letting the lather simply wash over the lengths as you rinse is entirely sufficient to clean them without chemically stripping them.
The research also gets very specific about the types of cleansers. It strongly advocates for sulfate-free cleansers, but specifically mentions they should contain mild betaine or amphoteric surfactants.
Yes.
To the average person, that just sounds like intense chemist jargon. What does that actually mean for the hair?
Let's break that down. Surfactants are the cleansing agents that make shampoo foam and pull away oil. Traditional sulfates act like chemical bulldozers.
Bulldozers, okay.
They blast everything away: dirt, the acid mantle, the natural lipids, and they force those cuticle shingles wide open.
Yikes.
Amphoteric surfactants, on the other hand, are highly plevral molecules. Because they carry both positive and negative charges, they act more like microscopic tweezers.
Oh, I like that.
They are gentle enough to pluck away the excess dirt and oil without aggressively lifting the cuticle or destroying the scalp's pH balance.
That is a brilliant way to picture it. Tweezers instead of bulldozers. And once the hair is clean, we move to conditioning and detangling, which is where the bulk of mechanical damage actually happens, right?
It is. When hair is wet, the temporary hydrogen bonds inside the cortex break down.
Meaning it's weaker.
Very. This makes the hair highly elastic. It can stretch much further than when it's dry, but it also means it is in its weakest, most vulnerable state. It is incredibly prone to snapping.
So we shouldn't just rip a brush through it.
Definitely not. The evidence clearly shows we should only be detangling when the hair is damp and already coated in conditioner, using wide-toothed combs or flexible bristles.
This was a huge aha moment for me. According to Professor Anya Martinez in the text, utilizing that specific detangling strategy, only coming when the hair has the physical slip of a conditioner, reduces mechanical stress by up to 40% for many users.
It's incredible.
That is nearly half the breakage eliminated, simply by changing the specific minute you decide to run a comb through it.
It's a massive reduction in cumulative everyday damage. But to get that SWIP, the type of conditioner matters immensely. And this brings us to the actual formulation chemistry.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The science actively dismantles some massive industry myths. Let's talk about the myth that using more conditioner or leaving a heavy mask on for hours automatically equals smoother, healthier hair.
It's a very intuitive yet totally incorrect assumption. People think, my hair feels dry, so I need to force feed it this heavy, buttery mask.
Right, more is better.
But remember our sponge analogy. If you have fine texture or low porosity hair with tightly closed cuticles, all those heavy oils have nowhere to go.
They just sit there.
Exactly. They simply polymerize or harden on the outside of the hair shaft. This creates a thick buildup that physically weighs the hair down, prevents any real moisture from entering later, and makes the hair look incredibly dull and lifeless.
And speaking of buildup, how can we ignore the great silicone debate? For over a decade, the dominant narrative in beauty has been that all silicones are evil, they coat your hair in a permanent plastic shell, and they suffocate the strand.
Yes, that's been everywhere.
But this text completely flips that narrative.
What's fascinating here is understanding the why behind the ingredient matrix. It's not a binary battle of good ingredients versus bad ingredients. It is entirely about molecular weight and context.
Context is key.
Always. The science clarifies that short to medium chain silicones are incredibly beneficial. They provide massive amounts of slip to prevent that detangling breakage we just talked about, and they form a brilliant heat shield.
And do they build up?
That's the best part. Because of their shorter molecular chain, they rinse clean away with a standard, gentle wash routine. They don't create that dreaded, permanent plastic buildup.
But it's all about how the molecule behaves in your specific environment. Take humectants, for example. Ingredients you see on every label, like glycerin or propanediol.
Humectants are fascinating. At a molecular level, they act like desperate little sponges. Their entire chemical job is to pull water molecules out of the surrounding environment and bind them to the hair.
Which sounds fantastic for hydration.
It is fantastic if you are in the right climate. If you are in a dry climate, humectants pull whatever moisture they can find and lock it into your hair.
Okay, but what if it's humid?
Well, if you take those exact same humectants into a high humidity environment, the mechanism backfires. They don't know when to stop.
Oh, no.
They keep pulling massive amounts of water from the humid air into the hair cortex until the strand literally swells up like a water balloon. The cuticle shingles are forced open from the inside out, the hair becomes sticky, and you get uncontrollable frizz.
So the exact same expensive bottle of serum that gives you flawless hair in the dry winter will completely sabotage your hair in a humid summer.
Exactly. The product didn't fail, the environmental context changed.
which perfectly illustrates what happens after the shower. Wash day's over, your hair feels great, but the second you step out of your bathroom, your hair is under a relentless environmental attack. We're talking about heat, the climate, and UV exposure.
The environmental stress is constant. Let's look at heat styling, which is the most aggressive form of rapid damage. When you use a flat iron or a curling wand, you are applying direct thermal trauma.
The clinical numbers on this are staggering. The research shows that recommended maximum styling temperatures vary based on the thickness of the strand, but for fine hair, it must be kept below 370 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 190 degrees Celsius.
That's the ceiling.
Now, I know for a fact that most commercial hot tools default to way hotter than that.
They do, often spiking well over 400 degrees. And we need to understand what mechanically happens at 400 degrees. You are not just shaping the hair. You are rapidly boiling the internal water trapped inside the cortex.
Oh, wow.
This internal moisture turns into steam, expands instantly, and violently bursts through the cuticle shingles. In trichology, it's literally called bubble hair because the cuticle blisters and cracks open.
That sounds horrific for the hair structure.
It is. This is where those short-chain silicones come to the rescue. When you apply a heat protectant, the silicones form a highly efficient thermal barrier.
Like a shield.
Exactly. Instead of the heat driving straight down into the core and boiling the water, the silicone layer has low thermal conductivity. It forces the heat to distribute laterally across the surface of the hair, allowing you to shape the strand without boiling it from the inside.
So imagine you're packing for a summer beach vacation. You look at your suitcase, you decide you aren't packing your curling iron or your straightener, so you figure, I don't need to put any heat protectant, right?
Wrong.
Right.
This raises an important question about how we view damage. Thermal and radiation stress comes directly from environmental sun exposure, too. It is a major myth that you only need protection from electrical tools.
From the actual sun.
Yes. UV radiation from the sun penetrates the hair shaft and actively breaks down melanin, which is the pigment that gives your hair its color. It also causes intense oxidative stress to the structural proteins.
So the sun is basically bleaching and frying the molecular structure of the hair, exactly like a hot tool, just at a slower pace.
Precisely. This is exactly why color-treated hair demands such specialized, chemistry-aware care. If you spend money coloring your hair, you absolutely need styling products formulated with UV-absorbing filters or naturally derived sun-protective actives whenever you go outdoors.
Or else it just fades.
Otherwise, the sun simply oxidizes the artificial dye right out of the cuticle.
The research also highlights how seasonal changes alter the physical chemistry of the water we use. It strongly suggests implementing a weekly clarifying treatment, especially during the summer.
That's a big one.
This is to remove the microscopic mineral buildup that happens from hard water, swimming pools, and chlorine. If you have a microscopic layer of calcium and copper from hard water coating your hair, none of those expensive hydrating conditioners can actually penetrate the cuticle anyway. You have to reset the canvas.
It all comes back to dynamic adaptation. Increasing those humectants we talked about during dry winters, decreasing them and relying on anti-humectants during humid summers, utilizing mineral shields when you are outdoors.
So you can't just do the same thing all year.
Your hair care cannot be a static, unchanging routine if your environment is constantly shifting.
I'm listening to all of this, and it sounds scientifically amazing, but also a little exhausting.
I could see that.
Let's be honest. With all these variables, figuring out your porosity sponge, balancing your scalp's acid mantle, adjusting for the day's UV index, checking the molecular weight of your silicones, how is the industry actually evolving? So the average consumer doesn't need a PhD in chemistry just to buy a bottle of shampoo that works.
That is exactly where the cutting edge of the industry is heading. Formulators know that the average person cannot manage a mental spreadsheet of all these chemical reactions.
Thank goodness.
The push right now is toward making this deep science highly accessible through technology and targeted formulation.
The source note's a massive shift behind the scenes. There's a huge push toward clean label, bio-based alternatives that are synthesized to mimic our natural lipids.
Yes.
And there's a massive focus on inclusivity in formulation. Historically, clinical testing was done on a shockingly narrow demographic.
Right, mostly just one hair type.
Exactly. Now, evidence-based development requires that a formula is rigorously tested on highly diverse hair types, curl patterns, porosities, and across different cultural maintenance practices to ensure the chemistry actually performs universally.
Yes, the science has to hold up across the entire human spectrum. And to manage all the variables we discussed, we are moving rapidly toward mass customization. The contract manufacturers, the actual scientists making the products behind the scenes for major brands, are investing heavily in digital diagnostics.
So will we soon see the death of the generic normal hair label? Because normal clearly doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't.
Are we moving toward a world where you buy a regimen explicitly labeled low porosity, high humidity, color-treated, hard water?
We're moving past static labels entirely. Think about the personalization apps mentioned in the clinical text. Imagine using a standardized, simple at-home testing kit to check your cuticle porosity and your scalp's exact pH barrier integrity.
Okay, so you get your baseline data.
Right. You feed that biological data into a brand's app. The app then tracks your moisture status, automatically cross-references it with your local zip code's climate, the UV index, and the humidity for that exact day, and dynamically adjusts its routine recommendations.
That is wild.
It is AI-driven formulation based entirely on your real-time biological data and environmental context.
That is incredible. The guesswork is completely eliminated. So what does this all mean for you? To bring this all together, achieving genuinely great hair is never going to be about throwing money at the most expensive glossy bottle on the shelf.
Definitely not.
It is about understanding the mechanics. It is about finding the right chemistry for your specific biological sponge, accommodating your porosity, respecting your scalp's acid mantle, and shielding against the specific climate you're walking into today.
It's about empowering yourself with the underlying evidence. You now have the mechanistic understanding to track your own moisture retention, to assess why your scalp might be overproducing oil, and to finally stop guessing in the hair care aisle.
You can officially walk past that wall of 1,000 bottles with absolute confidence, knowing exactly what your hair biologically demands. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the true science of hair care. We hope you walk away feeling a little more informed and a lot more prepared.
But before we go, imagine taking this personalization even further.
Oh.
The research briefly touches on the concept of smart packaging. Imagine a world where the physical shampoo bottle itself acts as a diagnostic tool.
Like the bottle itself.
Yes. Will your bathroom shelf soon be smart enough to monitor the integrity of the product inside, track your daily usage patterns, communicate with an app to analyze the seasonal humidity, and then physically alert you that, based on today's weather, you are about to use too much conditioner?